Hey everyone, it's Mr. Wolfe here, and I'm going to be going over Target 3 of our ecology unit. This is going to be on population growth. Specifically, it's about identifying different types of population growth and then also explaining why we would see these different types of population growths. So, let's begin. The first type of growth we're going to talk about is called exponential growth. And here's going to be a picture of a graph. And as we look, as time increases, the number of bacteria, that's going to be the organism in our population, as time increases, the population increases. However, it's not like it just increases steadily, right? We notice, especially around here at like time of 4 hours, that as time increases, the population increases at an increasing rate. And in other words, we could say that the population is increasing exponentially. And so we could also say that the next generation is about double the size of the last. And so why would this happen? Well, this is when things are good. There's unlimited space, there's plenty of food. Essentially, there's unlimited resources available. And this allows the population to keep on surviving and to keep on reproducing. And bacteria can reproduce really, really fast, by the way. All right. And in other words, we could also say that there are no limiting factors regulating the population. So what do I mean by limiting factors? Well, that brings us to our next slide. And a limiting factor is going to be an environmental condition that limits the growth of that will limit the growth of a population in an ecosystem. And so that should be limits, by the way. And so the example that I'm showing here is a cheetah chasing a gazelle. And in this case, the gazelle population is going to be kind of kept in check because there are predators. That's going to be an example of a limiting factor. But there's other ones as well, right? It could be the availability of food, competition for food, how much space there's available. Disease could definitely be one, especially as a population gets really, really big. It's a lot easier to spread disease, so the disease could kind of help keep the population in check as well. And then seasonal changes could also play a factor in terms of how well a population can survive and reproduce as well. All right. So what happens when you have limiting factors? Well, this is what we were talking about before with exponential growth, right? Our population is increasing at an increasing rate over time, but that's when we have an unlimited amount of resources available. There's no limiting factors. So when we do have limiting factors, we see something like this. And it's called specifically logistic growth. And logistic growth is exponential growth after it starts to level off right here. So it's kind of talking about like phase 2 specifically. So what's the effect here? Well, when you have limiting factors, the growth of your population is going to slow down until it, again, levels off. And it's going to level off at this area, this dotted line that we call the carrying capacity. All right, so I'm going to go in a little bit more detail in terms of what this carrying capacity is. So your carrying capacity is going to be this line here. So make sure you draw it on your graph. And notice, by the way, that a population is the actual red line. The purple is kind of more of an average. The population increases at the beginning of the 1800s, and here's our carrying capacity. A population can go over this carrying capacity, but when it does, it goes right back down and starts to kind of fluctuate and level off around this general area. So it's a general number. It's a general number of the number of organisms of a particular population that an ecosystem can support. So in this population, we could only support this many million of whatever organism this would be. So another important thing to keep in mind is your carrying capacity is not constant. It can be altered. It can be altered by changes in biotic and abiotic factors. So, for instance, imagine if for humans, for instance, that right now we have about 7 billion people living on planet Earth, and because of the innovations we've made in technology, we could probably hold about 9 or 10 billion, and there's still some debate on what that could be. But imagine if we started experiencing some extreme temperatures. All of a sudden, that carrying capacity for humans of about 9, 10 billion people might all of a sudden go down. And it's the same thing like in a forest. If you introduce a bunch of predators, maybe you could have had 1,000 deer in that forest before. But now that there are predators existing, they kind of like the carrying capacity might go down to maybe 500. So to kind of wrap everything up, in this lecture we went over exponential growth, what limiting factors were, And when you have limiting factors, you have logistic growth, and then it levels off at a general number called the carrying capacity.